Welcome to the Modern Hackers channel. If you like this content, please click to the subscribe button and like the video. So we will show you how it's built, this Hasegawa 320i, from the beginning till the end. The most important element is the sanding. I use Tamiya sanding sponge 3000-2000 grip because I found molding issues in the original plastic. That's a critical detail that you need to start with before making any priming. Additionally, you need to highlight the details, and the best tool to do that is a kind of engraver tool, and you need to check all details, all molding details. For example, highlighting the bonnet, the edges of the bonnet, the doors, door handles, all needed before priming. You do the priming. I used Mr. Color 1500 primer, Mr. Color leveling thinner, also the interiors, the bumpers, the body, front rear bumpers, that's a critical because the bumper is also part of the body, and it absolutely makes difference if you use primer because it will be much better. Also the chassis, I used primer. I have better attachment of the painting. The body shell, you can see the most important that you start with a thin layer, the first layer, not to have any dust on that, also with the primer, so just go with some thin layer in the beginning and the second thin layer, and then you will see the real problems after you put the primer on, because after you can see the real kind of molding or surface issues. I did see issues on the bonnet itself, and I fixed also the fuel tank and the spoiler. I made the adjustments and then I primed again the pieces where I did see problems. I used all the time for the body Airbrush nozzle and needle 0.5 millimeter one. For the interior and the small pieces I used 0.3 needle, or you can use 0.4, it's up to you, depends on your airbrush. I used Mr. Color gray colors. You can see all colors in the video on the right bottom. I put the paint on the right bottom of the screen, so you can follow which type of paint I use, which section of the video. I used always Mr. Color leveling thinner. That's my favorite because that's giving a really equal surface when I'm painting also the exteriors, interiors. Before painting, you need to make sure you mix the paint properly. For the silver elements, I also use Mr. Color paint. So this Mr. Color metallic paint is wonderful for silver or metallic-ish colors. For painting white, like the number plates, was a bit difficult because I had to make 3 or 4 coats just for properly cover the surface. For some smaller minor parts, I'm using hand painting with non-Mr. Color paints, like kind of acrylic paint, because that's not messing the original paint itself. Also, Hasegawa did not make reflective materials for the mirrors. I had to paint with silver. For the body, I used Mr. Color GX red color, which is a really base color, but it has a wonderful color, and I really like and really representing this era of car, the E36 BMW chassis from the 90s, and it gives a classic red for the body. Like if you try, you will feel what I'm talking about. I applied the paint in thin layers. That's very important. The first layer needs to be thin and cover the whole body, the body shell itself, with all directions. If you make it too deep, the paint, too much paint, if you put too much paint on that, then it's just collecting the dust. So the first layer needs to be very thin, and for second layer you should apply the same, and the third layer, third coat can be bigger, and the fourth coat you can apply more, because on the fourth coat the leveling thinner will kicking in and the whole body will be stretched to a symmetric layer, connecting the dots, similar like you would put some varnish on the top, but just magic that you can get the varnish like surface without varnish, just applying proper leveling thinner and the paint itself. I used roughly 50-50 40-60 thinning ratio with this leveling thinner. It doesn't matter how you apply, it's very forgiving, so you can't make a mistake unless you go with just 20-80 or 80-20. So if you go in a range of 40-60, so roughly 50-50, 40-60, 60-40 range, it's going beautiful. For the interiors, Hasegawa provided these great interior carpets with applicable material that you could just attach into the main shell. It's giving like a real car-ish interior. Unfortunately, the exhaust and the details of the engine and the bottom of the car is not detailed by the Hasegawa model, so I did not make too much attention on what is underneath. I rather focused on to make the body shell proper to see like a real car. So before applying the final layers and the final coat, you need to remove the dust and imperfections. That's very important. You can apply more to the last fourth layer, more paint, because then the leveling thinner kicks in. If you don't apply enough, then you need to make much spongy, and that's also not a big issue. Just the leveling thinner help you to flatten the surface. If you work with varnish, you need to make sure also the varnish is mixed. Mr. Color varnish I used, the GX 100 model. That's going very well, but you need to be very careful, extreme careful. The first layer needs to be very thin, and that's closing the surface from dust. So just an outer surface. It gives to the shell. You can see it becomes immediately matte, and it's losing the shiny surface. But don't worry, this is only the first layer. We will put 3 or 4 layers together. The first layer, you need to make sure no dust is attached, no hair on that. So for applying the second and third coat, you can apply more varnish, and you need to carefully monitor that is there any dust around that. You need to use proper respirators because these are lacquer paints. I'm using 3M A2 respirators with particular filter 3, so that's the highest spec that you can buy. So you should check in your country. Don't paint without a proper respirator. Also, you need to make sure that the flume is removed from the area, from the surface, so you need to have good ventilation system in your room, but rather paint outside if you can make it happen. So after the varnish applied in enough coats, technically 3-4 coats minimum, 4 I'm recommending, you need to green the surface with a greening sponge, for example 3000, 2000, but 3000 I'm recommending. You need to flatten the surface, and once the surface is generally flattened, you can start the process of polishing. I'm using 3M yellow polishing compound with Dremel tool, with Dremel rotary tool, and I'm first applying the mid-range sponge, the orange sponge, with 2-3 cycles to flatten the surface. You need to carefully monitor not to stand on one position. You need to move slowly your tool, otherwise the lacquer layer can be damaged and very difficult to fix it, and you need to repaint. You need to apply this few times, but not much more than the number of layers that you apply to the surface. You need to do the same for all type of the body shell. You need to be careful on the edges, because the rotary tool can pick up the edges, and that makes imperfections on your paint. And be careful the outer edges catched earlier than the inner edges. You can change to more softer sponges, so the black one is softer a little bit, and if the surface okay, then you can put lighter polisher compounds. I use 3M hologram remover at the end. After your body ready, then you can put the additional elements painting. So you need to mask properly, otherwise you can mask the original surface, and this will be very difficult to remove the improper paintings from the original surface. It's possible with some polishing and sanding, but you need to make sure it's not happening. I used flat Mr. Colored paint to making the window plastic materials and door openers. The windows are also key elements. You need to mask properly before you paint, because otherwise you can mess the whole window. Hasegawa provided masking vignettes, masking matrix for the window, so that was wonderful, but outer layer you had to be careful. That's not painted that you don't want to paint. Also the bumpers, you need to highlight the lines on the bumper, because in the traditional BMWs in the original era in the 1990s there was an additional black layer on the bumper with a flat black or a semi-gloss black paint. You can really highlight this detail. Also the edges of the window, I used hand tool, some hand paint, acrylic hand paint, to make the detail of the edge of the windows, and also some edge elements on the roof. that's a good material, because if you mask the surface, you can remove, because this acrylic, with acrylic thinner, you can remove if something went wrong. The lamps and the front, BMW front, are critical, and unfortunately Hasegawa did not provide different element to that, so that's why you have to mask and you have to paint, and you have to carefully make the painting and edging to black. That was one of the most difficult elements in this car. Also you have to paint the lamps with silver. I used also acrylic paints for these inner details, because you can still fix if something went wrong. Hasegawa did not provide a chrome plate for the BMW front, so that will be also need to be painted, similar like the lamps. So the lamps have to be painted with some transparent colors like AK colors. I used AK orange for the index and AK red for the rear lamps. This paint is very forgiving, and this either you can hand paint or you can brush. You need to use clear glue for attaching the lamps. You have to highlight the BMW front. As mentioned that Hasegawa not providing this in the kit, so you need to hand paint properly because it has curved edge. After most of the bodywork done, you should make final polishing with really a final polish compound. I used 3M hologram remover polishing compound, which is very forgiving and gives very good result. You can use rotary tool or hand polishing, but now in this stage you have many details in order to prevent messing up details. You can just simply hand polishing, and now it's a decent result. You can see it's shining, all details are good. Then the windows are coming. I use rather clear glue because that's not messing the plastic, and it's good for paint, good for gluing the windows. It's used for clear materials. And then I'm attaching the wipers. You need to properly set the wipers direction, because then later you can't adjust. There's also a detail of the index itself. There is a plate for the index that was also not came from the kit as an attachable element, so you have to paint additionally. The decals are very few that you get for the kit, front and back decals for the BMW logo. That was very easy to attach. It could be attached before the clear coat varnish, so in few layers earlier, but I wanted to use some 3M compounds to try the 3M compounds, and that is why I'm just attaching at the end the BMW logo. Maybe for the next kit I will attach earlier. And you got also the BMW logo for the wheels, the center of the wheels. That looks very great. You can feel, and you don't have to paint the rims because these are chrome from the factory, chrome plastic. The driver cockpit is interesting to attach the decal because it's not fitting to the place properly, so you have to put and then adjust a little bit. The mirrors were also challenging, that you did not have chrome mirror, you had to paint also earlier, and then you attach to the mirror, and then mirror to the shell. The tires were great, easy to attach. I did not see any problem with them. Also the interior went well, everything fit to the place. In this stage you need to make sure you're not messing the interior, so you just use very little and small paint. And try as not destructive paints as much as possible. So in a sense that Tamiya paint's not much destructive, but if you use some Reva paints, it may distract your surface. In the exhaust system, it was an unfinished at the end, the muffler, and you have to put a black dot to the end. Compact model, so it doesn't have too much pieces, so you can build this quickly. You need to be careful at gluing the bumpers, because you can mess the painting. That's a critical part, and you need to start from the rear bumper. That comes first in this model, and closing with the front bumper. After all sorted out, you get the wonderful result. This kit has wonderful look and feel. You should apply some weathering, some details to the shadows, to the edges, to the bonnet, to the trunk, to the windows, to the edges of the element. I hope you liked the video. This is the final result. It was worthwhile to build because the look and feel of the kit is awesome. I really like the kit. There were some hiccups, challenges, not each part predefined, detailed. You have to make the detailing with different colors, but I think you will like to build it. And if you like the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.